What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It is time for another edition of the NFL Weekly here on the network. Week 16, or excuse me, week 17 to be exact. Still getting used to that extra game. But it is week 17 this weekend, New Year's weekend. I hope you had a festive, safe holiday, whatever you celebrate, or I hope you just enjoyed the day off or holiday pay if you don't celebrate anything. But hopefully, all is well in your life as we get ready to turn the page on 2022. By this time next week, it'll be 2023, and we'll be ready to hopefully, you know, actually be our year. I'm just speaking for myself there. But today, a little different for the episode. Unfortunately, Coach and Raider Jim had some last minute scheduling issues. I don't believe Coach will be on. Raider Jim may be hopping on later, but for the moment, you're stuck with me. Unfortunately, hopefully you don't turn that off right away. Give me a chance. But yeah, it's going to be a little bit of an interesting show. It's been a few years since I did a solo show, so bear with me. There may be a few seconds of pausing while I catch my breath and drink a little bit of water. Usually I can rely on my boys to vamp for me while I catch my breath, but not today. So, but if you are interested, make sure you follow Coach at Portland 76er on Twitter, and Raider Jim is at Raider Jim 1090. And myself, you can find me at First Report, FERST Report, all one word. Yeah, let's dive straight into it. As always, we'll take a look back on week 16, or at least we take a look back on the week prior, and week 16 is what we have on deck today. Obviously, as an Eagle fan, it was a little difficult. The Eagles had a chance to clinch the NFC East and the NFC, or the top seed throughout the playoffs in the NFC, by beating the Dallas Cowboys. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Gardner Minshew, of course, got the start. Jalen Hurts dealing with a shoulder issue. The Cowboys overcame two different 10-point deficits. They end up getting the win 40-34. It was a good game. Gardner Minshew, I think, played very, very well, or as well as you could have expected him to in that situation. Unfortunately, it was the turnovers that really did the Eagles in. Obviously, look, you give up 40 points, you're probably not going to win too many games that way in this league. But this was a very winnable game if Miles Sanders holds on to the ball, even just one out of his two fumbles. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Kudos to Miles Sanders. He took the blame, or, I don't know if it's all on him. Obviously, it would have been a better situation, but he acknowledged that the fumble really hurt the team. He's going to do better. And his teammates were there to lift him up. That's the bad news as an Eagle fan. The good news is that game didn't really matter. I know that sounds crazy when you're trying to clinch a division late in the season, but the Eagles still control their destiny. All they have to do is win one of the final two games. And it doesn't matter what anybody else does. They're the one seed and they win the NFC East. Obviously, Jalen Hurts, a bit of a question mark. I am recording Thursday, the 29th of December. And as of today, he was at practice. He did not participate in the walkthrough yesterday. Obviously, it's a shoulder sprain. A lot of pundits and experts said that, look, if Jalen Hurts, or if this game against the Cowboys was a do or die, or it was a playoff game, something like that, Jalen Hurts would have started. They would have gone with him. But because of the Cowboys' loss 2 weeks ago to the Jaguars, they didn't really need to start Jalen Hurts, so we got an extra week. Still questionable whether or not he'll play this week against the Saints. But I think Gardner Minshew can get it done. Like I said, I really, he did throw two interceptions, but not anything that, no egregious passes in that situation. So it's going to be a tough week ahead. If the Eagles are not able to get Jalen Hurts back, you just want him to at least get back into rhythm. And that will be the first game that I'm going to be talking about. Excuse me. It is going to be the New Orleans Saints at the Philadelphia Eagles. The Saints currently are plus 240 on the money line, and minus 300, or the Eagles are minus 300 on the money line. The game, of course, will be in Philadelphia on Sunday morning, 10 a.m. here on the West Coast, 1 p.m. on the East Coast. Do the math in between. The spread sits at 6.5 for the Eagles, and the over-under is 44. I'm going to check the weather at the moment. I do believe it will be cold on Sunday, but no rain. There will be some rain on Saturday. So if that rain doesn't come on Saturday, we could see possibly some precipitation Sunday morning. But a 55-degree high and a 37-degree low in Philadelphia on New Year's Day. That's barbecue weather. So, it's still going to be a little cold for that dome team, but they won't have to deal with the frozen temperatures that we saw last week. But with that being said, you kind of have to go about this game looking at it two ways, right? Does Jalen Hurts start, or does Gardner Minshew start? I think if Jalen Hurts does start, I think the Eagles cover the 6.5. I think they win by at least a touchdown. They go out, they get the job done. There could be also a little incentive for them to get out to a big lead and then be able to sit Jalen Hurts while you already know you're going to win that game. The over-under is at 44. Excuse me. The over-under at 44. It's going to be tough. I really do want to lean towards the over, especially really no matter who is the quarterback for the Eagles. But I don't know how the Saints help out in this. I feel like for this to go over 44, we might need to see 28, 31 points scored by the Eagles. I don't know if they're ready for that with Gardner Minshew against a good defense in New Orleans. Obviously, the Eagles had their way with the Cowboys defense last week, but I do feel like that's a lot of familiarity. You obviously have already played the Cowboys. You pretty much prepare all season for the NFC East opponents, Cowboys being one of them. Saints are different. You don't see them too often. So I'm going to go the over. I do think we're going to see some points being scored, but I would not be surprised if the Saints don't hold up their end of things. And that's the reason this number stays low. Interesting scenario for the Eagles. I don't know for sure, but I have to feel like this is one of the first times or one of the very few times that a team has been in a situation where they not only can win their division and clinch the number one seed in their conference, but they can also improve their draft position. Because remember, the Eagles have the Saints' first round draft pick. So if the Eagles go out, put an L next to the Saints' name, that's moving up in the draft. So that's a double incentive here for the Eagles. It would be very sweet for the Eagles to go out, clinch the division, clinch the East, not have to worry about next week, and also possibly be looking at a top 10 pick while putting together one of the best seasons in franchise history. Outside of a Super Bowl, really can't ask for anything more out of a season. So I know Coach would have some very strong opinions, but at the same time, he'll be pulling for the Saints for sure. But I think even he would admit it's probably a long shot, no matter who's at quarterback for the Eagles, for the Saints to get the win here on the road. So I am going to go minus 6.5 for the Eagles. Once again, I do think Jalen Hurts plays, or even Gardner Minshew can get that number done. And then over 44. Raider Jim is also in agreement with me there, so that should be an extra incentive for you. Raider Jim, by far the smartest guy on this podcast. He's got the Eagles minus 6.5 and the over 44. Excuse me. All right, moving on to the second game we'll be talking about. It used to be a Bay Area rivalry. It is not anymore. The Raiders have moved to Vegas, of course, but we have the San Francisco 49ers minus 500 on the money line at the Vegas Raiders, plus 375 for the Raiders on the money line. The spread has the Niners as 10-point favorites, and the over-under is 41.5. Obviously, this would be a point where I would give the floor to Raider Jim, as he is, of course, the Raider expert of the pod. So I'll do my best to fill in the blanks. Big news for Vegas is another tough loss last week. Another game in which they were leading late in the fourth quarter and they lose. It's I don't know what else to say. All you can do is really shrug. If you're a Raiders fan, you just shake your head. They're kind of like the anti-Minnesota Vikings. Vikings are 11-0 in one possession games. The Raiders seem to be unable to hold leads and win one possession games. So for the Raiders, they've decided they are going to go in a different direction at quarterback, at least for the rest of the year. Derek Carr has been benched. Jared Stidham, former New England Patriot and Auburn Tiger, he will be taking over in Vegas for at least 2 more weeks. Now, it would take a absolute miracle. I'm talking Christmas style miracle in terms of immaculate conception and being born in a manger, blah, blah, blah type of miracle for the Raiders to make the playoffs. But technically, the Raiders are not eliminated from playoff contention. Once again, there has to be something like 23 different scenarios besides the Raiders winning their final 2 games. And let's be honest, in this situation, will they cover? Maybe they may cover the 10, but I don't think anybody's expecting this team with Jared Stidham going out there against the number 1 defense in the league. This is going to be the Niners winning. The next question has to be, do they cover the 10 points? Raider Jim looks like he bought a 0.5 point. He likes the Raiders plus 10.5 to cover himself from a 10-point loss. That'll still get the job done. He does like the over 41. Looks like he bought a point there as it's 41.5 on our line. I tend to agree with the Raiders side of things. The Niners are playing maybe the best football in all the league right now. They're playing really well. Brock Purdy, they haven't taken a huge drop at the quarterback position going from Jimmy G to Brock Purdy. But it's the defense. As coach or Raider Jim, I forget who said it a few weeks ago when Jimmy G got hurt, but this team is going to go as far as their defense allows them to, and that includes if Jimmy G is in. So Brock Purdy has done a fantastic job taking the reins, won his first three games, I believe, in the Niners uniform. I believe that continues. I tend to agree with Raider Jim. I really like buying that 0.5 point. Look, honestly, if it comes to the Raiders, err on the side of whatever Raider Jim says. So that's what I'm going to do here. Raider Jim has it Raiders plus 10.5 and the over 41. I tend to agree. I feel a little more confident on the spread side of things. The over 41, I do question whether or not the Raiders can do their part to get over that 41 against a really good defense starting a rookie quarterback with a coach in Josh McDaniels that may be very bright, but it hasn't translated to him, getting that out of his team on the football field. So we'll see how that goes. Going to be very, very interesting to see how that goes at Allegiant Stadium in Vegas. Moving on to a big NFC North matchup. You have the Minnesota Vikings at the Green Bay Packers, and you may be surprised to hear that the Packers are actually favorites in this one. The Vikings are plus 145 on the money line. The Packers are minus 175, and the spread sits at Packers minus 3.5. And the over-under is 48. Now, obviously, I was surprised by this number. The Packers are essentially playing playoff football. A loss and they're done. They have to win out. They still have to get some help, but they have to win out. And this is a game I think that's very winnable for them. The Vikings they are 11-0 in one possession games. And I feel like half of them, they were down double digits at one point in that game. It's absolutely incredible to see what the Vikings are doing. But the same question is, how long can you continue that? Sometimes, when you fall behind in a race, or sometimes you fall behind in life, it takes a lot of effort to get caught up. By the time you're caught up, you're almost out of energy. Well, guess what? The race isn't over. You still got to finish the race. You caught up, and that's great. Kind of how I feel like with the Vikings, they've expended so much energy getting to this point. And then they look and go, we're not even through the regular season yet, and we still have to go through the playoffs. More than likely, they're going to have to go on the road at some point in the postseason as well. So keep an eye on that. Excuse me. But it's going to be a very tough challenge for both of these teams. Obviously, the Vikings still have hopes for a 1 seed. They're out. It's kind of another miracle that will need to happen, but they have to win out for that to happen. And They would also like to beat their rival who they dominated earlier in the year. I believe it was week 1. The Vikings went out and dominated Green Bay at home, really kind of put everyone on notice. But I just think Aaron Rodgers, Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers have never lost a game in December. That is incredible. I believe they're at 12-0 now. It's up there with Norv Turner and Phillip Rivers back in the mid 2000s with the Chargers. Just refuse to lose in December, and that's what the Packers are doing. And normally they're fighting to improve their position. Normally they're 11-4 by now. This year they're having to fight for their playoff spot. That's a scary scenario. Putting Aaron Rodgers into a corner, backing that animal into a corner. He's going to fight back, and he's done that over the last few weeks. I think that continues. I do like the Packers -3.5. I think they win this game, but I don't think we hit the 48. I'm going to look at the temperature in Green Bay real quick as I vamp quickly. It's going to be a tough matchup for the Vikings just because of what it means to Aaron Rodgers. He loves to beat his division rivals. And this is a game that not only beating your division rivals, but improving your opportunity to get into the playoffs. And that's all you need in this league. Get a ticket to the dance and see who's dancing at the end. But looking at the temperature Sunday, you're going to have a high of 38 and a low of 28. Now, for me, being a Southern Californian, that freezes me immediately. But for the folks of Green Bay, Wisconsin, and in that region, a high of 38 on New Year's Day, I think they'll take that. Similar to the people of Philadelphia, that's borderline barbecue weather for them. So I don't think weather will be too big of an issue. Keep an eye on the wind. That's always something that we can't really predict 3 days out, so that's something to keep an eye on. Game day, but like I said, I like the Packers here. 3.5. Maybe a bigger number than I'd like. I'd like to see 2.5. If I could find 2.5 on a sports book, I'll take it. But yeah, I do like the Packers -3.5 and the under 48. Raider Jim is almost in full agreement. He also likes the under 48. Raider Jim did buy a 0.5 point. He likes Green Bay -3. So keep that in mind when you're getting your notes together for this weekend. As we dive into what Joe Buck is calling the biggest Monday Night Football game in years or decades, might have been the quote, but it is going to be a really good one. Probably the best on paper for the whole year. Monday Night Football has been a bit of a snooze fest. This will probably change that. You have 2 of the 3 best teams in the AFC, the Buffalo Bills at the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bills are -125 on the money line. Cincinnati is +105. Once again, this is Monday Night Football. Buffalo is 1.5 point favorites, and the over-under is 49.5. Raider Jim likes Buffalo on the money line. Look, when it's only -1.5 on the spread, you might as well go money line. So Raider Jim likes Buffalo -125 on the money line. He also likes the over 49. I really like the over 49.5 as well. I think we're going to see some points being scored. Neither of these defenses are particularly great. They're definitely serviceable. You don't have any Achilles heels defenses here, but I think the offenses will have better days. I'm checking out the weather in Cincinnati as we speak. But it shouldn't be, just judging by what we've seen. Well, we will see, looks like we'll see some rain on Monday. But you're going to have a high of 59 and a low of 55. So it's going to be in that, 55 plus. I think the people of Ohio and Cincinnati would love that. Obviously the rain isn't ideal, but temperature wise, January 2nd, you're in the 50s. Ooh, definitely barbecue weather there. So, weather shouldn't be an issue. Give me the over 49. But I do like Cincinnati here. I don't know why. I think it's just the Burrow effect. I wasn't too high on the Bengals in the offseason. I thought they were going to regress. They struggled early on in the season, but they've figured it out. They've won 7 in a row, I believe. I think they keep that coming. The Bills, I don't want to say they don't have a whole lot to play for, but they've already clinched their division. Probably not going to get the 1 seed. Cincinnati, on the other hand, they would love to get this. They own the tiebreaker against Kansas City, so they need Kansas City to lose. one of their remaining 2 games regardless. But if that happens and then they win this game against Buffalo and win next week, Cincinnati's the 1 seed. So there's a lot to play for both of these teams, but I think just a little bit more for Cincinnati. And I think that's the difference there. So give me the over 49 and give me Cincinnati money line. Myself, Raider Jim in agreement on the over 49.5, but Raider Jim's taking Buffalo. Cincinnati is my pick. So pick your fighters in that one, if you will. So 1 second while I take a sip of some water. All right. Next up, the 5th game, we'll be talking about another big matchup in the NFC South. Now, the NFC South is very tight, but it's not very good. We're more than likely going to see a team make the playoffs at 8-9 in this one, or in this division. And at the moment, the Carolina Panthers, plus 135 on the money line, Tampa Bay minus 160. The Buccaneers are 3-point favorites, and the over-under sits at 41. Carolina impressed me last week against the Lions. I didn't expect Carolina to do what they did running the ball against the Lions. And while Tampa Bay's defense is not nearly as good as it was 2 years ago when they won the Super Bowl, this is a much better defense than what the Lions trotted out last week. So I do like Tampa Bay -3 in this one. But I also like the under 40.5. I think Carolina is going to struggle. I think Tampa Bay just stacks the box and forces Sam Darnold or PJ, whoever is starting in Cincinnati, in Carolina, forces them to beat them through the air. I don't think teams are going to let Carolina run all over them like they did last week, if they can help it, of course. So Tampa Bay -3. The over-under, I do like under 41 or 40.5. Raider Jim also likes Tampa Bay -3, under 41. I just think this is going to be a defensive battle. Both of these teams, obviously, the winner of this has the inside track to winning this division. Look, when the chips are down, you probably got to go with Brady, if we're being honest. In a game in December, a big game like this, we're not used to Brady, fighting for a playoff spot week 16 or week 17, but that is what it is, and that's where he is right now. So Tampa Bay fighting. I think they get the job done, beat a inferior Carolina team, and in the end, the Buccaneers probably make the playoffs. Be a very interesting matchup, if that's the case, because we would see the Buccaneers and the Cowboys. And I don't think any Cowboy fan wants to see Tom Brady week 1 or, in the wild card weekend, the way they've been struggling in the playoffs of late. So moving on to the AFC South side of things. And if the NFC South was bad, the AFC South is even worse. At the moment, the Jacksonville Jaguars lead that division. Good for them. It's a nice story. But more than likely, they're going to, at the very best, get in at 8-9, possibly win this division at 7-10. But we'll see how that goes in this one. They'll be facing the Houston Texans, who got a huge win over Tennessee last week, after playing really well against Kansas City and Dallas, but not getting the win over the last 2 weeks. Jacksonville is 4.5-point favorites. Excuse me. Jacksonville 4.5-point favorites. The over-under is 43.5. The money line sits at -225 and for Jacksonville, and plus 180 for Houston. Once again, this game is in Houston. So we have, home underdogs in this one. I really like the Texans here. I don't know why, but the Texans they've played really well over the last 3 weeks. And I know they're only 1-2, and the NFL coaches will always say there's no such thing as a moral victory here or there. But Houston was looking like one of the worst teams in league history until 3 weeks ago, and then came out, nearly beat the Cowboys, probably should have beat the Cowboys, and definitely should have beat the Chiefs. And that's kind of crazy. Obviously dominated the Titans last week. I think they get the job done again here. I like plus 4.5. I like the money line. I'd like to see it get closer to 200. But I have no problem taking plus 180 or even going plus 4.5, covering yourself from a field goal or miss extra point type scenario that gets it to 4. I think that can get done. 43.5 though. I like the under here. I think both of these teams defensively, that's where their strengths are. And neither of these offenses are, really showing out lately. So give me the under in that one. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how Houston responds. Do they continue to play at the level they've been playing, or do they kind of go back to what we've seen majority of the season? And for Jacksonville, look, they're a team that if they make the playoffs, Doug Peterson has to be in the conversation for coach of the year. I've been very impressed with how that franchise has really turned it around in a year. And I know they're not, looking great. If they were in any other division besides the AFC or NFC South, they would be in a lot of trouble right now. But I think you still have to feel pretty good if you're a Jacksonville Jaguar fan, especially the progression of Trevor Lawrence. With that being said, as I said, I do like Houston to get the at least cover here, plus 4.5. Raider Jim is actually on the other side of this. Raider Jim likes Jacksonville to cover the 44.5, but RJ does like the under 44. Looks like he bought a half a point there. So half and half there. We're both on the same wavelength on the over under, but different sides of the spread there. Our 7th game we'll be talking about will be an NFC North matchup. It is the Chicago Bears at the Detroit Lions. The Bears are plus 210, and the Lions are minus 275 on the money line side of things. Lions minus 6 on the spread. Over under sits at 52. Very big spread here. Now for the Lions, they were kind of that feel good story, looking like they could make a playoff push. And last week, they really did lay the proverbial egg against the Panthers. I think at halftime, they had given up something, close to 200 yards, maybe even more rushing. That is not great, especially when you see a team like Chicago come to town. Chicago wants to beat you running the ball. That's probably the only way they can win a lot of games in this league is running the ball. Well, guess what? Detroit, not very good stopping the run. I think Justin Fields has a big day for the Bears. I think the Bears cover the 6 here. This is a winnable game for the Bears. They are on the road, but Detroit, doesn't scream home field advantage. The Bears travel well, could be close to 50-50. I like the Bears to cover here. Like I said, I depending on where that number sits, plus 210 for Chicago. I'd like to be a little greedy and get that closer to plus 250 if I could, but definitely feeling confident with Chicago plus 6 in this one. I think they do cover, if they don't win, it probably a last second field goal that does them in. 52. Both of these offenses have been good of late. And then the defenses, not so much, mainly Detroit. Detroit's defense is really bad. Playing indoors, so the weather in Detroit won't matter. It's a tough one. 52, it's a lot of points, but you do have 2 pretty bad defenses. I'm going to go over on this one. I think we're going to see some points being scored, a 31-24 type game. 31-28, 27-24. Actually, no, 27-24 won't get us there. So 28-24, something like that at the very least, a push, maybe buy a half a point to get it to 51.5 and go on the over. 28-24 is, a score that you could see, and that'll put you at 52. So I'll take the over 51.5 final answer. Raider Jim is actually the opposite on this one. He likes Detroit to cover the 6 and the under 52 in that one. So take that for what it's worth. Myself and Raider Jim in a little disagreement on the NFC North matchup. But moving on to the 8th game I'll be talking about this week, we have the Miami Dolphins at the New England Patriots. The Patriots are 3-point favorites. The over-under is 41.5. The money line looks like Miami plus 130, New England minus 160. The big news in this one, Tua Tagovailoa, who had a really rough Christmas, if we're being honest. He's done for at least this game, back into concussion protocol. The Dolphins again looked like they missed a concussion. Tua got tackled in that Christmas, yes, it was Christmas Day game against the Packers. And after that, didn't look good. Both, in the eye test and throwing the ball. He ended up throwing 3 fourth quarter interceptions. And then, of course, we all kind of went back and saw, Tua get taken down. It wasn't a dirty play or anything like that. He just gets tackled and his head hits the turf. It wasn't recognized. It wasn't called out. Tua did not come out of the game, anything like that. He remained in. After the fact, they put him into concussion protocol. I guess it's better late than never, but it's tough. It's a really bad look for the Dolphins. Now, this is the second time this year that they've trotted Tua Tagovailoa out with a concussion, and had him finish the game. And I don't think any person or sport fan should blame Tua in this situation. Every single athlete playing at that level, doesn't really matter what sport, is going to tell you they're fine. It's your job as a head coach to make that call. You have to pull him out. Not in the fourth quarter interceptions aside. I'm not saying this because, he went out and lost the game for them. That doesn't matter. We're talking about a young man who is now a minimum of 2 concussions this year. And I say minimum because you never know. That's scary. 2 concussions in a year. You talk to a doctor and they're going to tell you to stop doing whatever you're doing that's doing that to you. This is a young man who still has a lot of life to live. My favorite football player of all time, Junior Seau, took his life because of this game. I struggle with it. I still feel guilty watching this game, knowing that it is a violent game that ruins people's lives. It's tough, but I do still love the sport. And, at the end of the day, these players are signing up to do it. No one's being forced to play this game. So, you do take it hand in hand. But I'll step off my soapbox and dive into the analysis of this game. Obviously, with Tua being out, that's going to put a big damper on things. I like New England -3 in this one. I think Mac Jones and company do enough to beat the Dolphins in a matchup where the Patriots really need it to make the playoffs. They're fighting for everything right now. But 41.5 is the over under. I like the under there. So give me New England -3, under 41.5. Both myself and Raider Jim in agreement there. He also likes the Patriots on the spread and the under 41.5. Our second to last game we'll be talking about this week is the biggest spread of the weekend as well. It's the Denver Broncos at the Kansas City Chiefs. The Broncos plus 525 at Kansas City, -750 money line wise. Kansas City is -12.5 point favorites, and the over-under sits at 45. Big news for Denver this week, obviously, the firing of Nathaniel Hackett, only 15 games. Is it 15? Yeah, 15 games into his tenure with the Broncos, kind of culminated this past weekend, I believe. Yeah, it was Christmas night. It was either Christmas Eve. No, it was Christmas night. Sorry, I'm just getting myself caught up. It was Christmas night, and the Broncos got absolutely dominated in that one. I think it was 51-6, 52. I didn't watch the game, I'll be honest with you, but it was a very, very lopsided situation. Nathaniel Hackett was fired 2 or 3 days after that. Not the season the Broncos wanted. They are fully turning the page on this. The bad news is probably the guy who put them in this situation, Russell Wilson. Firing him is not that easy cap-wise. He signed that 5-year contract at the start of the year. He's looking like, $40+ million of dead cap money if they get rid of Russell Wilson over the next 4 years. I know the last year of his contract, if they release him before that, that's $50 million of dead cap space. It is an absolute nightmare scenario for the Broncos. I feel like the only way they feel like they can get their franchise back on track is if Russell Wilson gets himself back on track, because they do not have the ability at this moment to make an upgrade there. And I don't think any team's going to come trade for that Russell Wilson contract after the season he had. 12.5, though, with that being said, that's a big spread, even with Kansas City coming in this one. Kansas City clinch their division again. They've won their AFC West, I believe, for the 7th or 8th year in a row, but they still want that 1 seed. They want to make sure the AFC playoffs roll through Arrowhead. So I think they know that they need to win this game, but I don't think they're going to really open up the playbook and go for the kill against the Broncos, because let's be honest, they don't have to. The Chiefs do not have to play a game to beat the Broncos. The Chiefs could probably play a D+ game and still beat the Broncos. Covering the 12.5, though, that's the real question for this podcast. Raider Jim bought himself a 0.5 point. He likes Denver +13. He likes the under 45. You know what? I like that as well. Denver +13, under 45. Sometimes when we see teams change coaches the next week, they kind of turn it on. You know, it's a bit of a kick in the behind. I know Russell Wilson wants to improve. He's not been endearing himself to a lot of people this year. But you know what? I've looked at Russell Wilson, and up until this year, I think he's been one of the most consistent quarterbacks. And you know what? On a human level, this is a guy who kind of gets ridiculed for what he says and kind of how he acts. He's kind of corny, but he's never changed. And you know what? I respect that. I might not want to have a beer with the guy, but I respect the fact that this guy has been, you know, the same Russell Wilson back in 2010 when he got started to where he is now. So I always root for him. I always like to see Russell Wilson do well. Unfortunately, this year has not been the case. He's got to kind of figure things out. Had that concussion a few weeks back, did play this past week, didn't really help, obviously, unfortunately. It was a really, really tough situation for Denver all year, but I do think they do enough to cover the 13, but I think it's more Kansas City just not putting the effort in to cover. They don't need to cover. All they got to do is win the game. They don't want to break out any new plays for a playoff team to see them run against the Denver Broncos. So moving on to our final game of the week. It is the New York Jets at the Seattle Seahawks. The Jets are -120 on the money line, and Seattle is even money. Surprising that the Jets are favored here. Now, we are not seeing Zach Wilson. There's a lot of talk. Zach Wilson probably will not ever suit up for the Jets again, or at least never start at quarterback for the Jets. A lot of rumblings that he's going to be released and the Jets are going to be moving on from the former first round pick after the year. And you can't really blame them. It's been a really rough start to the career for Zach Wilson, maybe the end of his career as well. I don't know if there are too many teams that are going to be willing to take a chance on Zach Wilson as their starter. But in terms of this week, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that the Jets are favored in this one. I like Seattle money line, as does Raider Jim. It is only even money, but I think Seattle should probably be closer to -125, -130. Seattle struggled of late. They've kind of come back down to earth after they got off to a very hot start and looked like they possibly could make a playoff push. That's not going to happen, but I do think they have enough weapons and enough talent to beat the Jets. The over 42.5, that's a difficult one. 42.5 is kind of right in that sweet spot of, you know, a 23-20 or a 24-21 type game. It could go either way. I do like the over 42.5 though here. I think the Jets offense gets, a little bit, a bit of a fire lit in their backside with Zach Wilson being benched. I don't think he was terribly liked in that locker room. I think the Jets offense could possibly turn things around here. And I think Seattle gets things figured out as well. Pete Carroll's a great competitor. He might not have the most talented team, but I firmly believe his team is always going to compete harder than the others. Might not translate to wins and losses, but they're going to go out and give it everything they got just because of what he brings to the table. But with that being said, I'll take the over in this one, over 42.5. Raider Jim also in agreement on that one. So once again, both myself and Raider Jim like the Seahawks money line and the over 42.5. So with that, thank you all so much for listening and putting up with just me. Normally you're able to actually get some good insight from Raider Jim and Coach, but you had to stick with me today. But I'm happy you did. My final thoughts, look, it's going to be the same pretty much since Thanksgiving. Be safe. We're in the holiday season, obviously New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, that this whole week between Christmas and New Year's is a heavy drinking time. Just make sure you do it responsibly. Make sure you have a plan. Make sure you are not getting behind the wheel after you've had anything to drink. You're putting yourself in danger and, to be honest, more importantly, innocent bystanders in trouble or in peril by getting behind the wheel of a car while you're impaired. So please have a plan. If you can afford to go out and drink, you could probably afford to take that Uber home. And I always say this, I'm a former bartender. If you drove to the bar and you drink more than you expected and you're not feeling great and you're worried about your targeting code, I promise you, talk to the bartender and they will figure out a way to make sure that no tow truck comes through and tows your car. You're doing the responsible thing and they will work with you. But at the same time, you need to communicate these things. So once again, just please be safe, be happy. And, 2023 is here. We're getting ready. Obviously, when January rolls around, it's time for playoff football. 2 weeks away from that. Cannot wait to dive into with the boys in a few weeks. But with that, thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the NFL Weekly presented by the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench, but we are first. It's time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating, everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon. Have a great weekend and Happy New Year.